Michaela did cover this really well, but as part of my immigration practice, I look at clients' taxes all the time because often tax returns are required when you're filing for something with immigration or you need to show your taxes. So I know for a fact that the vast majority of the undocumented population that I see and I work with actually is filing and paying taxes. And the reason that people want to do that is because nobody's, very rarely do I encounter someone who thinks, well, they're just here kind of like, for a free ride or they're going to take advantage of benefits. That's not the case. People want to comply with the law. They want to be engaged in society. They want to be paying taxes. And part of the reason is because eventually if we have immigration reform, that's probably going to be a critical component of any kind of immigration reform, that someone can show that they've been paying taxes. So I just think it's totally incorrect. Most people are filing tax returns in addition to the property taxes, the sales taxes, all the other taxes that people are paying here in Virginia.
I was just going to add that if the people who aren't paying taxes are likely under the income requirements, so they would not need to pay taxes anyway, because people find it very difficult to get gainful employment. So many people are under the income level needed to file taxes.
After a student, someone has who will dance for the deferred action, how long will he or she will have to wait until the workers work?
Well, initially we were telling people anywhere between 4 to 8 months, but right now the trend that we're seeing is about 3 months to get the work authorization. It's not necessarily consistent because it depends on the number of applicants that there are and the number of people that they have hired to make decisions on those applications. But right now what we're seeing is about 3 months that it's taking for them to make a decision on the application. And then at that point, when the work authorization, when the work permit is issued, you have 2 years of work authorization from that point. And then the question of whether or not there is a deadline. Right now, there is no deadline on applying, but that could always change depending on the circumstances. So it's still a good idea to do it as soon as possible.
What would you say to people who would ask, would say, wouldn't passing this bill encourage or at least enable people to immigrate illegally as opposed to going through the legal process?
Okay, so the question is, what do you say to people who think that passing a DREAM Act would encourage more immigration?
It's not actually a concern of mine.
Well, if you've seen the deferred action requirements, the deferred action for childhood arrivals that's currently in place, it requires that you enter the United States at a certain time before 16 years old, and that you've been in the United States for the last 5 years. So we anticipate that with the DREAM Act there would be requirements like that as well. And the way the requirements are set up, you have to demonstrate that you actually have been here with some hard documentation. So it does discourage people from them entering the United States in order to gain the immigration benefit.
Just to kind of reiterate, all of the proposed different versions of the DREAM Act that have been introduced have always had a time requirement that you typically have already had to have been here for at least 5 years. And those every time they kind of reintroduce the bill, it seems to get a little bit stricter. So that's one argument, the fact that, well, you shouldn't encourage people to come because you're not going to qualify if you come now or if you come maybe even in the next 5 years. We don't know if it would be passed again. So right now it would just be limited to the class of people who are here in the U.S. right now and who have been here for at least 5 years.
Yeah, I would like to add, I think Michaela, she say very clearly, this is something that is not going to encourage. And I think we should go more for people who are here, definitely. If they get all the documentation and they are legally here, they will provide more economically to Virginia, for instance. We are talking about in 30 years, like $5 billion for Virginia alone. It is a huge amount of money that Virginia is. But unfortunately, without documentation, they cannot work. So it is, we need to facilitate this very much.
Since he's dealing with a lot of younger generation, younger ages, let's say even if under the age of 18, one of them gets in sort of legal trouble, how will that affect their process going through the dreaming or the deferred action? What type of punishment, or will they totally just be cut off from the program? Do they have to walk very straight line?
Okay, so the question is, what happens to students if they get in any kind of legal trouble? Does that make them ineligible for any of these programs?
That question is a little bit complicated right now. It's not 100% clear. People who are charged with violations of the law who are under 18 are usually in juvenile court. Traditionally, juvenile delinquency findings do not count as convictions for immigration purposes. So if someone were applying for their green card, for example, and they had a juvenile delinquency finding, some kind of problem, underage drinking, something like that, they had to go to juvenile court, they were found guilty of that. That traditionally would not count against them in applying for their green card or applying for immigration benefits. But with deferred action, it's sort of this whole different thing, and they've said that USCIS, which is the part of the Department of Homeland Security, will consider, they will take into account any kind of juvenile convictions. So it's sort of different, and I don't think we have a ton of clarity on how that's all going to shape, how it's all going to kind of play out right now, and what kinds of convictions would be considered to be something that would disqualify someone. It's not an automatic disqualification. Definitely, if you or anyone who has an issue like that, definitely consult with an immigration attorney. We are hearing about some situations where kids are applying for deferred action and they did have some kind of juvenile offense, and it's ended up being a problem for them. Typically it's not going to rise to that level unless it's something really serious. But don't be afraid to go talk to a lawyer about exactly what happened. Don't just think that because it happened when someone was 14 or 15 that it's in the past. Even if it was expunged from your record, even if it's a sealed record, it still could be in a database somewhere. It still could be taken into consideration by immigration. So definitely consult with an attorney.
Okay, I want to honor our time. We're coming to the end. Is there any last questions? I have one last question I'd like to ask, because I think it's really important as we get the knowledge, we're starting to understand the issues, and then what's next. So what can you do, as students, as people in this community, what can you do to help if you're so moved to do that? I'd like to ask you guys to just comment on, what can they do to help you in your fight to help immigrants?
Well, certainly in our office, we have a lot of opportunities for young people who are passionate about working with immigrants to come in and volunteer, and also get some experience and find out if this is a field that they're interested in. So if that's something that you would like, actually I've got some materials up here that I can hand to you. Definitely also, as Christy said, if you or your friend, someone who needs to speak to an attorney about possible immigration benefits, please encourage them to do so, because there are a lot of people that are afraid to do that. There are a lot of people who've heard of very bad experiences, and certainly there are attorneys out there or notarios out there that are ready to take advantage of you. But there are also a lot of organizations out there that are ready to help. So we have a list actually actually hear of some great credible organizations. So if you or your friend needs that information, please pass them on.
Yeah, so Bacola also is organizing regarding the DREAM Act, and especially we will be beginning organizing the immigration reform. It has changed so much the tone since the results of the election. During the General Assembly, which will begin January 9th, we will be organizing a lot of activities statewide. So you all are invited for January 22nd. We will go to the General Assembly to talk with our representatives. So there is a lot of activities that you can get involved. So I would like to end from my part asking you, so how many of you came to this country 2 years ago? You can raise your hand. One. How many of you came 10 years ago to this country? I am raising also my hand. How many of you came to this country 100 years ago? I mean your relatives. How many of you have relatives who came 500 years ago? Everybody will raise your hand. So that question is only so to see each other. We have the same story. We are all immigrants, or we descend from immigrants, and we are hermanos. So we can do a lot together. If we understand each other, I am sure this country could be even better. This country, to have the discussion of immigration openly and with this understanding is great. So I like this country so much. I immigrated here 10 years ago. I didn't speak English. I learned English here, and I am addressing to you, which is amazing for me. I could do it in Spanish. I wouldn't have any problem, but I'm doing it in English. So it is amazing. So in that way, please get involved, be active. The DREAM group project that Dr. Emma Viola is organizing is a great group. You should get involved with that. And please don't cruzar tus hombros y no hagas nada, ¿no? So hay que ser.
That was a great conclusion, but I think it's really important, I think, for you guys to continue sharing your stories like you guys did today. That really makes it so much more real for a lot of people who are opposed to the DREAM Act and opposed to immigration reform. It's so important, and I think we all owe like a huge thank you to all of the Dreamers, because deferred action would not have happened without the movement of the Dreamers this last couple of years.
You know, one of the things that sometimes when I heard the stories of the Dreamers is many of you who may be native English speakers who have the privilege of having a social security, a U.S. citizenship. Many times we take it for granted. But in your class, you may have a student that doesn't have your same privileges. And many times, I have heard students that are Dreamers be hurt by some of the comments that other students make about immigrants. And I just want to remind all of us that many times we are very careful about certain comments that we may make that are racist. But at the same time, let's be careful about comments that we make about immigrants, because we don't know who is there in our classrooms. Just, I wanted to do, yes.
So also, if you guys are interested in volunteering or anything with either the DREAM Project, or we have just started a group called the Dreamers of Virginia, and if you are interested in doing rallies or maybe setting up events like this at other high schools, just look us up in Facebook, Dreamers of Virginia, and then like our page, and then you'll just see all the information.
If you heard anything today and you think of questions later, or if you want to continue the discussion, come by my office, 223. I'd be glad to talk about it with you. I won't get offended by questions. If you're honestly looking for answers, please come and ask, and we can have a discussion. And if any of you want information from these speakers today, and you don't get it on those handouts, just come by my office and I'll make sure we can hook you up get you involved in volunteering if that's what you'd like to do. So thank you very much for coming.